welcome back here for our next interview. Today we have Roger Kitchen Jr. on our series from Alabama. He's a high performance coach for athletes as well as in business. And we're going to talk today about how you can perform at your best and how you can stay in the zone and how you can come in the zone. So, hi, Roger. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's great to be on the show.
Can you give us a short introduction about yourself?
Sure. As Johannes mentioned, I'm the founder and mental skills coach for Power Mental Performance. I've been doing this high performance coaching since February 2017, primarily focusing on high school athletes. I've done work with college programs, specifically Division I hockey, and then I work with a lot of adult athletes in a variety of different sports. But primarily I've fallen into working with several high schools in my area and working with high school students. And it's interesting. It's been a lot of different sports. It's been swimming and diving, basketball, football, cross country, track and field, even volleyball. So a lot of the sports in the area with the schools I'm working with have reached out for the help. And really what I try to help those athletes do is increase their self-confidence. That's always a thing that comes up. That's pretty common. Where does that self-confidence come from? Improve focus, achieve goals, and the fourth is perform under pressure. Because really, as the stakes get higher, as you progress in your particular sport, that performing under pressure seems to be the foundation for a lot of those other three. If you can manage the emotions, if you can deal with the anxiety, even the butterflies and the nervousness, you learn different skills, concepts, and techniques that are going to help those athletes perform better in those high pressure moments. And so those are the four things that I help those athletes do. I coach coaches to help their athletes do the same thing.
Great.
I work with a lot of coaches on how to develop team culture. Because you and I've probably been on teams that had poor culture. We've been on teams that had great coaches that developed a really good unified group and developed a real healthy culture. So I teach coaches how to do that as well. And so that's a little bit about what I do. My tagline is I help athletes focus on the right thing at the right time, all the time. And so it's a skill, got to work it, got to develop it. You got to put in your reps mentally. And, that's what I help athletes do in our area.
How do you build these foundation that you have been mentioning, like performing under stress? How you can build that as an athlete?
It's interesting. It's a skill just like fencing. There's certain things that you have to work on day in, day out. Think about basketball. If you want to get better at free throws, you have to practice your free throws every day. If you're a quarterback in football, you've got to run the routes and pass and do the skills. So mentally, it's the same thing. There are lots of different concepts and things that you can do, like visualization, like breathing. And there are things that you can do on a daily basis that help you develop that mental skill so that when you get into that particular situation, it's that mental muscle memory comes back and it helps you perform in those moments. So things like that I'll teach an athlete. Another huge one is self-talk, having that positive self-talk. So learning how to use that day in, day out. I've got a methodology I call MVP. It's mindfulness, visualization, and positive self-talk. So it's the MVP process. And then I break that down in detail for the athletes so that they can have a systematic way of walking through that. And it takes 5-10 minutes a day to work on it. And then when you get into your practices with whatever sport, that's when you practice it again. And then I teach the coaches the concept so that they can reinforce it within their teams.
Oh, wow. That's so important, right? Because the coaches are normally there and they basically have to guide their athletes in some way.
Right.
To keep them on the track. And what do you think? How do you get as an athlete in the zone? I mean, this, basically as a fencer, as an athlete, you always want to get in the zone, right? And that's where magic happens as an athlete.
Right.
So what do you think? How can we as a fencer or as another athlete, it's basically most likely the same for you, that you use the same concepts in different sports.
Yeah.
How do you get in the zone as a fencer or as an athlete?
So I'll take you through the fencing. So we'll use your sport. So the zone is really a combination of two things. It's what you can control and then
Mhm.
what you focus on.
Right.
So I do like a team exercise where I'll break a team up into groups and
Mhm.
just get some flip chart paper, put a line right down the middle. On one side, I say, tell me everything that you can control in fencing.
Mhm.
On the other list, tell me everything you can't control in
Mhm.
fencing.
Mhm.
And you get the athletes to write all their, their controllables and uncontrollables.
Mhm.
So you tell me as a fencer, what's something that you can control?
That I can or can't control.
Can, can.
I can basically control my internal state if I'm able to do it, right?
Hmm.
I can control my preparation. I can control
Yes.
my warm up. I can control the focus, right, and my self talk if I'm
Mhm.
trained in that.
Yeah.
What I can't control is basically my opponent, the
Right.
referee, and maybe the weather, the venue, things like this happening.
Yeah. So the fans watching, all those
Right.
things.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when the stress or the anxiety starts creeping in, that
Mhm.
self-doubt is when I start leaning towards my uncontrollables.
Right.
A ref blows a call, doesn't give you the point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, opponent, talking to
Mm-hmm.
you. Fans, maybe even your coach, your teammates.
Right. Yeah.
And so when I start drifting that way, that's when I start developing that anxiety and stress. When
Mm-hmm.
I lean and focus, and it's a skill, you got to learn to teach yourself to focus on things you control. Your preparation is really big, focusing on that because one of the things I talk about with athletes is have a pre-game routine,
Mm-hmm.
a pre-meet routine, a pre-match routine. Do those things over and over and over again. Keep it consistent
Right.
because that's something you can control, and it takes your mind off the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so packing a gym bag, hydration, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
sleep, uniform, gear, just, music is a big one. Pre-game music, pre-match music,
Mm-hmm.
things that you can control that when you develop that process,
Mm-hmm.
it just starts to relax your mind. And that, that's one, staying on that controllable side. Then the other thing I talk to them about is, okay, again, let's get another piece of flip chart paper, draw a line down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what your goals are.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to achieve? And then tell me what's the process to get there. And
Oh,
so athletes will list all these goals, you
mm-hmm.
know, win percentage, free throw percentage, time in running, whatever the
Right.
statistic is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, what's the process goal to get there? And they'll list all those things. For like a basketball player, it could be, I want to do 30 extra free throws a day.
Mm-hmm.
So in fencing, you'd probably have an example of that. So what would an example of that be in fencing?
Well, for a lot of people, it is to win an Olympic medal,
Yeah.
for example. And for this, you have to have certain results to even qualify for Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
You have to achieve those results, which also, but this is and then you have maybe some process goals, meaning okay, I have to do, let's say 30 hours or 20 hours of training per week. I have to do that certain amount of gym. I have to do maybe meditation. I have to do visualization before every training. Could also mean, as you mentioned, what a lot of world-class fencers have. What I've seen, what a lot of fencers don't have, is a ritual, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
literally a ritual before every training and a ritual before every competition. And it's very interesting. I've been talking to a very, very good fencer yesterday on the same series. And he mentioned that what I have not seen from a lot of fencers, that he's coming to every training with a specific process goal. So
Mm-hmm.
a specific thing, he's focusing on that specific training. And he does that for, let's say, a week, right? So at the beginning of the week, he says, okay, on Monday, I'm training this, Tuesday, this, Wednesday, this. So he's really structuring and really having these goals that keep him focused and help him to achieve his goals, which is a great way to do it.
Right. Yeah. So like in fencing, footwork is huge.
Right.
So let's say you got to work on your footwork and
Mhm.
say, whatever the metric is for that, you just think about Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to do these particular exercises or movements to improve my footwork, agility, things along those lines. So that's where I want athletes to stay, because they'll get too fixated on Olympic medal, world championship medal,
Right.
national team meet,
Mm.
and they're so far out in the future. And that's, when you're constantly thinking there, that's where your mind is going to feel the stress and anxiety.
Mm.
When you really take it, and the best athletes take it down to even just practice, and then they break it down like, I'm going to do this in this hour of practice, and this in this hour of practice, and this, and when they get it there, that's where the gold is. And so when they focus on the process, so getting back to your question, how do you get in the zone? You can't magically snap and get there.
No.
It's a process by which, if you start focusing on what you can control and you understand what your process goals are, it makes it just a lot easier to, when you get into competition, you've put in the work, you've done the work, you know what you need to do, and you haven't fixated on the future, because the future is uncontrollable. And the past is uncontrollable.
Right.
If I had a bad meet or a bad match, I've got to learn to let that go. We got a concept called play present, which is I should be able to recover from a mistake in less than 3 seconds. And I try to get that even, almost instantaneously. So it's not worrying about the future. It's not living in the past. It's really moving, one play at a time, one thing at a time, and just learning to let go, and not live in the future. But it's a mental skill. I mean, it takes a lot of practice to do that.
It takes practice. It's the point, right? I mean, when I'm working with athletes, and we're working on very specific things, right? Visualization, ritual before competition, and they're not, not training that, and then they come to competition, and then they maybe come back to another session and say, well, it didn't work. Then I normally say, well, I mean, you have trained that. How long does it take you to learn a new action fencing? And they say, well, 3 months, half a year, maybe a month, I don't know. Well, and then they normally realize, or then they often realize, or maybe not, that's really something they really also have to train in basically everyday session, right? What do you think? How can a good ritual, a good competition preparation look like?
What would it look like? So I'll speak for me. My background is in powerlifting, so I do competitive weightlifting as a master. Haven't done it since college. Got back into it a couple of years ago. And interestingly enough, in my day job, I do business consulting, and previous job I had was working at NASA, coaching high-performing teams, high-performing leaders, and we hired a sports psychologist to come on our staff and work with us and bring those sports concepts into the business world. And one of the things he quickly talked to me about when I got back into powerlifting was that ritual and that routine. And so for me, it's, if for the next day of practice, it's pack my gym bag. What do I got? Something as simple as all my gear, something as simple as the right clothes, having the right gear in order to go work out and train. And then when I get there, what do I do? And you really think about it and analyze it. You just break it down step by step. So my youngest son runs cross country, indoor and outdoor track, and I would work with his team on this. And I say, what do you guys need in your gym bag that, when you're working with high school students, it's, all over the place and it's easy to forget stuff and be distracted. But breaking it down to, what do you need in terms of gear? What do you got to do the night before? Hydration, nutrition, sleep. The other thing I want them to do is visualize it. Visualize what you guys have to do for a practice, visualize what you have to do for a meet, so visually, mentally walk yourself through the ebbs and flows of that meet, when you got to sign in, when you got to warm up, when you got to get ready for your event, what heat are you in, what lane are you in, and just mentally and visually, as if you're living it, daydream, there's all kinds of words you can throw in there: daydream, visualize, imagine, look at yourself on a human highlight reel, and walk through those things. So there's the physical part, which is get your gear, make sure you get enough rest, hydration, sleep. But then there's the mental part, which is visualize yourself doing what you want to do. Visualize yourself having success. Visualize yourself competing at a high level the night before, a week before, 2 weeks before, building in those repetition, what I call mental reps. And that helps quite a bit.
Hello everyone, my name is Johannes Poschanek. I'm the president of the International Social Skills Academy. With the High Performance Mindset Power Program, we designed something specially for fencers. In this 8-week program, we will show you how you can have better results, how you can achieve your goals, and how can mental performance lead you to success. Please take a look. We're very happy to host you in our 8-week program. And now let's continue with the show.
You have been mentioning that you brought the concepts that you used, or the same concepts that you basically use to work with athletes, also in the business concepts, in the business context. Do you think that if you learn them or if you require them as an athlete, it helps you also in your future career?
Oh yeah. So, the biggest thing is it seems like that controllable, uncontrollable discussion always comes up in business, because I'll find a lot of leaders and managers and they will obsess over things they can't control. So the particular NASA organization I work for, they provide support and operations to International Space Station. And so we worked with a team that was supporting the International Space Station. And I started having this discussion about controllables, uncontrollables. And like this one lady's, her eyes got big. She goes, "Now I know my problem." I'm like, "Well, what's that?" She goes, "I was so worried about stuff I couldn't control. If I just take care of my business and what I need to do, it just makes my job easier." And so that's been a very easy conversation to have with leaders, but it's also been eye-opening. And then breaking down the process goals and the results, breaking those apart. You've got a big project that you have to accomplish in business, but what are those little steps that lead up to accomplishing that big goal, and just focusing on that and getting people's mind to go there in the business world has been really big. And then really what's come here in the States, it's really starting to get a lot of traction, is the mindfulness at work, the meditation, the breathing, the relaxation techniques. Incorporating, businesses are starting to really embrace that because they see how important it is for stress management, and they're starting to teach a lot more resilience concepts, for employees learning how to deal with the anxiety and adversity, stress of their work.
Great. I've told you before, when I was in Stanford, I also had a lecture of a venture capitalist, and he was an ex athlete as well. I'm not sure which sport it was. And he told me that what he really implemented in his business is this: as an athlete, okay, you lose, and then you go back to the drawing board, and you say, okay, what was good?
Yeah.
What could I have done differently? Then you go back to the drawing board, and then you try, this new thing out. And if that works, fine. And if not, you go back, like we as athletes do. And he told me that this was maybe the most important thing that he learned from sport, and that really helped him, to create his company, to build up the company. And it was very, very interesting to hear, because that's what what we learn as an athlete. You lose another match, you win, great. You lose, okay. You have to look what was good, what was bad, and continue, right?
Yeah. So when I try to, with an athlete, I try to get them to do that self-assessment on their controllables.
Right.
So it is important to do the self-assessment. So that athlete in basketball, being an example, could have scored 20 points, but really, how was their focus? How was their self-talk? How were those things in terms of, overcoming a mistake and recovering from that? Did they play present, in that moment? And, getting back to that process, it's like, let's do our self-analysis on the process and those things that I can control. because at the end of the day, that's where the dividends pay off, and that'll eventually come.
Right.
Yeah, we can, I had a swim dive coach that took it one step further. So we said controllables for the swimming diving team were obviously focus. Obviously my effort, I can control how much effort I put into it.
Right. Yeah.
And then my attitude, that's a controllable for athletes as well. But then she added one more. She said technique, because technique's really important. As a fencer, technique's important. And so they felt that was a controllable for them, and that's fine. And so it's an easy self-analysis at the end of the day. It spells FEAT, F-E-A-T, focus, effort, attitude, and technique. And so that's where their self-analysis came from. After the meet, where were we at on these four? Not so much worried about the result and the time. Look, athletes love to PR, in certain sports. They would like to get that personal record. That my sport is filled with that, in powerlifting, squat, bench, and deadlift records, and it's easy to chase a record and a number. But when you stay focused on that focus and that effort and that attitude and that technique, and that's where the self-analysis comes, it makes competing so much easier.
Right. I mean, what comes in fencing, what I see a lot is that basically there is we have pools, and after the pools there is a ranking, and then you get your based on your results from pool, you get a specific opponent, that should be, that basically coming from the results of the pool. And of course, there's often, I see an internal change in athletes, saying, "Oh my God, why exactly I get this opponent?" I mean, this is something you cannot manage, right? The only thing you can manage is basically how you react in that. From one of my mentors, I always heard Johannes, the problem is never the problem; it's the state with which you enter the problem, basically, right? And I mean, I feel it so often myself. It depends so much on how I go in the match. If I say, okay, this will be a hard match, well, the confirmation bias, comes in and gives me a hard match no matter what.
So everything in the environment starts validating what you think. Right. Oh yeah, that's hard. Right. Yeah, I got that ref. Oh boy, again.
Yeah. Or even if I go to the gym and I say to myself, I mean, wow, that will be a rough, hard gym session. Now, well, of course it will be, right? It makes so much difference if I say, okay, today I'm trying to challenge myself and I try to get a new personal record, as we mentioned before.
Yeah. One of the things that a lot of people, about 80% of the, when you think about a percentage, what percentage of any sport, even fencing, is mental? What would you think?
Well, I had the same discussion with a psychotherapist, like sport psychologist some days ago, and he mentioned fencing is something between 80 to, let's say, 50%. It depends on the range what people say, but let's say at least 50% mental.
Yeah.
Why people don't work more mental if they put so much time and effort in gym and in fencing, but if they say 50% is mental, why they don't put more time, not even 10 minutes per day in mental training, right?
Right. Yeah. So most people I ask that question to will say 80-90% of my sport's mental. It's pretty high.
Right.
And so with that being said, about 80% of the time, you may not feel 100% because it's a grind. The training's hard, the schedule's hard. And so a lot of times people want to feel great all the time when they train. People want to feel great even when they compete. And what the one thing that I really try to get through to people is, even though you don't feel great, you can still perform great. And that goes back to the self-talk you were saying. And there's a lot, look, powerlifting's, the training's brutal and it's hard. And there's days you kind of limp out of the gym and the workouts are hard. But I mean, if I had $1 for every time I said, I can perform great even though I don't feel great, I'd be a rich man, just because, that's just the self-talk you have. And that's where you walk yourself through those tough moments, but you've got to have those little mantras, those little sayings that you can rely on.
Right.
that are triggers and keys to mentally keep you in the present and to realize that what's standing in front of you is not as big as you think it is.
Mhm. Right. Well, Roger, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
I would like to discuss with you for hours, but I don't want to take too much of your time. And I think most important things have been said. How can people reach out to you if they want to work with you? You know, from US or maybe also online from other.
Yeah, so I do a lot of virtual work. So if somebody has a Facebook account, I'm on Facebook at Power Mental Performance. I'm also on Instagram, Roger Kitchen Jr., so you can reach out via social media. And so those are two easy ways for people to reach out to me. And then from there, we can set up times to work virtually, either through Zoom or another social FaceTime, things along those lines. If people are in the U.S., my phone number is 256-698-6389. So people can call or text me and get a hold of me. If you're outside the U.S., just put a 1 in front of it and you'll still get a hold of me. So yeah, I'm easily accessible.
Right, exactly. And guys, if you also know maybe like, you know, other sports, I mean, you have been working with so many different sports. So if you know somebody who, you know, is interested in working with you, maybe from basketball, you said you're working a lot with, cross country, swimming, you've been working with, diving. We will happily forward you the contact details of Roger.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to do it. Easy to do virtually. And so yeah, it'd be a pleasure. Appreciate your time today, Johannes. Thank you for reaching out.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. It was very interesting. And yeah, thank you for the interview.
Yep, you got it.
All the best.
All right, thank you. Take care.